Hello, everyone, and welcome to Psychedelic Peer Support, How to Treat It for a Friend. On behalf of MAPS Canada, our board of directors, and our incredible community of volunteers, we are so grateful to have you here. First, I would like to thank our sponsors, TRIP and Sports Lab, for making this event possible. All profits raised from this event will go towards funding MAPS Canada life-changing clinical research. First, I would like to give you a quick note of what we are going to be talking about today. So today we have the pleasure of speaking with Lidija Martinovic-Recker. Lidija is a somatic counselor influenced by yogic and Buddhist traditions that she has studied, practiced, and taught for the past 20 years. Besides her ongoing teachings and private counseling practice, she holds space for ceremony, psychosomatic spiritual space, and integrative therapies for post-entheogenic use. She practices post-psychedelic integration as a form of harm reduction and as an adjunct to her counseling practice. And under the supervision of her teacher and elder, psychotherapist Andrew Feldman, who was a direct student of the famous radical psychiatrist, the late R.D. Lane. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that. Okay. A brief PSA before we start. MAPS Canada acknowledges that humans are autonomous beings and they are free to take their own health-related decisions. So in order for people to be safe, we need to provide them with the tools to use psychedelics properly without encouraging their use in the process. The information that will be provided in this session is for informational purposes only and should not be taken as medical advice. And if you have any questions for Lidija during the session, you can submit them. There's a button here, it says ask a question. You can just type them, and during the session, you can vote for your favorite questions, and then we will get to them during the Q&A. And with that, I would like to welcome Lidija. Hi, Lidija.
Hello. Hi, everyone.
How are you today?
Good. I was thinking I was coming down with something. So these days you can't get little sick. You always think of the worst possible thing. But I'm feeling okay right now.
We're living weird times. So yeah, do you want to start with a little land acknowledgement before we start the session?
Yes, I think this is very important practice that we're doing right now. I would like to say that especially when we're talking about these sacraments, which for me psychedelics are, I'd like to acknowledge that I am sitting and playing and working, and I have come here uninvited on the stolen land of the Musqueam Nations. And I learned this in Musqueam language, that it says Oitsepka Oisium Musqueam, with the hands like this, which means I'm greeting to the wise elders that have been holding this space for thousands of years. And I'm asking permission to speak.
Thank you very much, Lidija. Yeah, so why don't we just jump into the questions. Can you tell our audience what your background is and what brought you to the psychedelic space?
Before I start talking, I just want to say that I have an access need. And as you can tell with Antonio and myself, the English is not our first language. And although we're speaking it, I at least think on two languages. So I might sometimes be speeding up or need to slow down or pause, and bear with me. So my background, well, Antonio has said that I am actually working with a counselor and a yoga practitioner for the last 20 years. So I have to say that I am not actually or specialized for working with these sacraments in a ceremonial way. I have to say that right away. I am a ceremony holder, but I'm actually a legal wedding ceremony holder, and I'm holding the ceremony of the rite of passage and so on, but not a ceremony with psychedelics. I would leave that to elders and to indigenous peoples, and if I ever put any training in how to be in this space of holding space, that would be a very important part to invite the indigenous person to talk about it, because this is we're only borrowing all these substances from its sacred use. And how I'm using them, it's mainly only to alleviate suffering. And the reason why I'm saying this is because your whole this podcast is down to how to sit with the friends. So I don't know how helpful will I be with this question. But I can tell you my experiences. So I've been interested in psychedelics, well, since forever. We're grown up in the era of 60s. But I always was, in my family, we had a lot of suffering. And although my parents were very highly functional European family, still highly neurotic, and we had a lot of what's called a mental illness. My sister committed suicide when she was 28. I was 24. So I was deeply, deeply interested. Also, thanks to my sister who introduced me to R.D. Laing and to yoga at the time. I was deeply interested in ethics of how we treating each other and how we treating human suffering, because I could see that system failed her, parents failed her, and she in the end had to end her life, which I had to come into peace with because it was very impactful for me. And as I said, at the time in Europe, I want to give a context of the context in history, which I think it's important. So 1970s, so we're talking about the early era when the psychiatry was very divided. So there is a group of psychiatrists that just wanted to go and have this strong establishment of creating some kind of a list of mental disorders, as if there is something like order. Or a blueprint of health, and actually they succeeded. They actually, the establishment of psychiatry actually exists today as such. But at the time, pretty bravely, this amazing group of psychiatrists who were all questioning that and really pointing the fingers on how we actually treat this suffering, and we call it mental illness, and that mental illness as such is not existing. So Thomas Sass was speaking about actual mental illness as a myth. I am just reading his book, the science, the science of the lies of psychiatry, something like that. Like, these are pioneers that we're talking about in 1970s, and at that time, trauma is considered to be brain disease. Can you imagine that? In the DSM, in Diagnostic Statistic Manual, the trauma was listed as a brain disease, and we had a hysteria at the time where actually they thought that it was only present with women. But because of the post-war situation, R.D. Laing was seeing a lot of people from army, and he was seeing a massive suffering. So he was saying that we're making a big mistake by, and we're missing a part. We're missing a mark by focusing on the mental illness. And when he was asked, what do you see in your offices with clients? And he would say, I'm seeing humans. I'm seeing bewilderment. I'm seeing loss of meaning. I'm seeing people that are traumatized. Nobody just feels bad unless something has badly happened to him. Nobody has trauma unless they have been traumatized. So, so that's why what I'm saying, that I am really seriously considering the ethics of psychiatry. And more and more what I'm seeing on the scene is that we're talking about the bioethics, which is actually ethics of how we treat what is called the mental patients, and how much freedom they have to say what they want to be exposed to. And if they can be given within the 15 minutes the diagnosis and be given the psychopharmacology, as Artie Lang says, why don't they have an options to take psychedelics and psychopharmacology and so on? So both my teacher Feldmar, who I met when I came to Canada, as you can imagine, I mean, pretty traumatized from my own home situation, but also coming from a war-torn country. And he really, I claim to this day, saved my life. But it happened to be that he was a direct student of Artie Lang. So it was a full circle for me to meet him. And how they hold space. I mean, if you have an opportunity, just go and find Artie Lang. It's in old videos, but find a space to see how he holds space for people. There is no higher and lower. There is no experts in the room. There is a sense of equal humanity that is being met. They're meeting in a communion of love. What I like about my teachers, they both speak of love. No science speak of love. Artie Lang would say, love is always there. We are the one who fade away. And they always come to the space speaking about how to meet with the person. It's really just a sense of deep listening and holding space of no planning. There is no protocols. So when you're talking about the maps having protocols, I'm having a red flags, because I don't think that protocols are a good idea. So that's kind of in short of what my lineage is, but I had to say it in the context of history.
And so you've been practicing yoga and Buddhist practices for the last 20 years. How is that associated with your holding space?
Well, I think I'm coming from a socialist country where I was not a fed spoon religion. When I came to North America, I was shocked of how much spirituality is being fed to these people, and how much institutionalized and betrayed and tortured and politicized people are. I mean, look just what we've done to indigenous people. And I'm not saying we, but I'm talking about the white supremacy and what is created in this space. So I wanted to be connected with spirituality, but I wanted to have something that is not religious, but something that points me to the wholeness. And yoga is that, Buddhism is that. For me, Buddhism is not, religion is more of a science. And what yoga taught me, and how is that related with me holding a space, is first and foremost is that primal intelligence, and I'm quoting Tibetan teacher Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, is that primal intelligence is not a seed that you need to nurture. It's not like the seed and you just need to water it. That's called self-improvement, and that has nothing to do with spirituality. The primeval intelligence is rather a gap that happens when the space opens. So in that sense, that gap and that spaciousness, it's the space of healing and the space of spirituality and the space of my presence with others during the psychedelics. Also, in Buddhism, in Buddhist psychology, which you always need to study, practice, contemplate, and you have to have debates. You always have to debate about that. So in Buddhism, it says, be the lamp to yourself. Don't trust just because I said so or so and so say so. Be the lamp to yourselves. But the Buddha nature, this nature of awakenment, is inside of every living and non-living thing. Everywhere around ourselves is the sacredness. And if anything, we should be going around and singing hallelujah at every moment. But as we know, this is not happening. Another reason why I'm using yoga and Buddhism is because they're talking about the body. And that's one thing that I gave to my friend Mark Hayden as a feedback on his psychedelic manual. is that there is a lack of awareness to the body. And, we live in the body. The trauma not just happens only here. Actually, you know what? We can actually, the humans are funny. We can trick ourselves. Even with psychedelics, we can actually have such ways of hypnotize or trick ourselves that even with psychedelics, we can do so. But body doesn't lie. And when you take large doses, and in my tradition, we're not dealing with microdosing. Microdosing can actually just enhance the defense mechanisms. It's good for you to kind of lift up and take little microdoses of mushrooms and whatnot. But when you're really going into and wanting to do some big shifts in your life, especially when it comes to alleviating suffering, we're talking about mega doses. So Artie Lang would be using maybe 1,200 micrograms of the LSD, or my clients are using 8 and up grams of psilocybin. So you're using the large doses. And in that sense, as a society, we're talking about body, and why yoga? Why not studying physiotherapy and then come and hold the space for somebody? Because we are, in Western society, we're so obsessed with our muscles, and we're obsessed with nervous system and brain for some reason. When you ask a Tibetan teacher or anybody who's Tibetan, where is the mind? He's going to point it to the heart. And interestingly, in the development of the body, the nervous system was one of the youngest one. It was a recording system. It is the system where things are recorded, so it's very important that we know what is recorded there. But what is underneath is the cellular system, and it's the fluids within the body, other than just our breath. So there is a complexity around that I'm contemplating or doing a little training on it, just because I think it's very important, because if you're missing the body, you're going to be missing a very big part in the practice.
I'm always surprised when, like you said, the maps protocols are always like, people are always like lying in beds and like very static, and yeah, it always surprised me that they follow those.
Yes. Go ahead. I can comment on that, which kind of goes into your next question, is what kind of training you have to have in the experience. I'm working with people who are decided to take psychedelics, and they take the psychedelics on their own, and then I come in just to cover myself legally. Then I coming in, and basically what I'm helping is from freaking out, and I'm helping them to relax. So, and when I say relax, that's actually the highest yoga teaching is about the relaxation. As we know, the Taoist teaching of non-doing is one of the highest teaching. So when you said that you are putting people, and this is what Hopkins is doing, Hopkins Institute, and all the research right now is happening is with people being down, lying down, putting the music in their ears and having an experience, and then the person who's sitting there can read a book or navel gaze, as far as I'm concerned. There is no technique. But what I'm saying is that in the context that I'm holding space, I'm not going to just ask the person, if somebody asks, oh, I would like to have a psychedelic experience. First of all, I would say, why would you like to do that? Don't do it. This is not don't be, this is no for the little fainted of heart. And if they say, well, I'm curious, then I will say, I'm not going to be working with anybody. Curiosity kills the cat. Like this is not a good enough reason for me to hold space for you. But if they really look deeply and they say that they would like to do it in order to alleviate suffering and be fuller and present in their lives and just feeling this sacredness. These are the sacraments. These are the mind manifesting and the heart opening substances. So when they say that they're going to do that, I'm not going to say, okay, let's do that next week. This is kind of like saying to somebody, let's go and have sex the next day. Nothing wrong with that. Maybe people like one night stands, but I like the depth of lovemaking. I like the depth of knowing each other. As my teacher said, or quoted St. Francis is, in order for you to love somebody, you have to know somebody. In order for you to know somebody, you have to love somebody. So when you're asking me, how can you train somebody to love somebody? There is no protocols. There is no manual that can give you that. You, first of all, have to have that experience yourself. And just to say, and establishing the safety, security, and trust with the clients, I would have to know that we're trusting each other, not just if they're trusting me. Why would they trust me? Why would I trust them? That is happening moment to moment, this development of trust. And when that happened, then memory comes. Usually when this safety, security, and trust happens within the context of the counseling, then a memory comes, memory of trauma, memory of grief. And this is where the moment of healing actually happens. And it's really sad to think about that as a society, we don't know what to do with grief and suffering. And actually grief and suffering in the Buddhist, it's a path we need to go, and that's the way to actually understand oneself, going deeply into the grief. So how, sorry, I'm just asking myself the question that was down. Is that what you wanted to ask me? What kind of training or experience one has to have?
Yeah, we can talk about like training and yeah.
Yeah, so one training and experience is like you have to do it yourself. Sorry, something is hopping on my screen. You have to have experience. I wasn't daring to go and sit with somebody. And first of all, I'm not a guide. That's a misguided space. I'm a counselor who is sitting there in a form of harm reduction for those who are decided and take the psychedelic substances or entheogens, or I'm sitting with people who take MDMA as well. That is not a psychedelic, but a empathogen. I wouldn't dare to go to hold space for somebody for, I think, 15 years of doing it myself in a sacred setting. I never done any psychedelic experience as a recreational, never done it in group, never. From the moment one, that was the sacrament. From the moment one, me going into it was a pilgrimage. And I had to go, and somebody says, once you go down to hell and back, when you go down to hell and go back, what else do you want to do in life but be there supporting others, who are going through this experience? You're not going to go out and buy Porsche and going to Mexico Riviera. So in other words, it's like you have to have an experience. You have to be like a midwife that is like going through this and kind of feeling your own rebirth. You have to have a mentor. You have to have a supervisor. I would not dare to do this on my own. Artie Lang, when he came to Vancouver, he said he was sitting with a group of therapists, and he said to them, why do you think you're doing this work? And then he says, well, you're either a healer naturally, or you apprentice with one. And I don't think I'm a natural healer. I had to apprentice. And I'm still apprenticing. After 25 years, I have my supervisor and mentor, and I'm twice a week sometimes having the sessions with him to help me, guide me to be holding space for others. Yes.
So you mentioned harm reduction. Sorry, keep going.
Also, I wanted to say just that the holding space is more like a feminine principle, but I don't want to call it like I don't want to add the gender to it. It's more of a mother space. So it's not the space where you want to be like a pushing or thinking that somebody should be in a certain state of mind. You have to have a lot of time and not ambition, as Ferenczi said. So you have to be in the space that you can be just watching the cocoon turning into butterfly in its own time. And sometimes the cocoon goes into the state of complete dissolution, which these medicines do. You go through the ego death. You go through complete dismantling of your consciousness, but then the moment, and you can't be afraid, you have to be there like a midwife. You can't just say, oh my God, let's call police or ambulance. That was two things I don't want to happen when I have a psychedelic experience. I don't want to call police, or I don't want to call ambulance. That's number one, because these substances are not dangerous, and they're not changing the cellular structure as was put down when the Nixon era they were proclaimed to be dangerous. None of those are true, and we know that right now.
There's so much to unpack there. So you mentioned harm reduction, and that's the main purpose of this event. Are there any people who should not consider using psychedelics, in your opinion?
Those who question the psychedelic should not go near to it. I think self-selection is the best selection. If there are people who are kind of, I wouldn't like to convince anybody to take it. Let's put it that way. I think that would be a very bad idea. Hey, it works for me. Why don't you take it? Or what I've heard from my friend is her brother put the LSD in her cup, and then like, I had a great experience. What about you? So absolutely not. So you need to have, just as you put a disclaimer in the beginning saying that MAPS believes in autonomy of every human being. So we should be treated as such. Everybody can decide. And if there are people who say, I want to try this, whether it's legal or not, I want to try it and I'm taking full responsibility on it, I will hold fair space for them. In a harm reduction, hold space, meaning that I won't call police and say they did something illegal. I'm holding space for them to release or diminish harm, and we know what harm reduction effect was when it comes to the opioid crisis. So
yeah.
It's interesting that society is treating us as if we don't know what we're doing. You see, society and the whatever state government, whatever you call it, psychiatry, they're all like bad parents. Bad parents in a sense of, I can say whatever I want because I don't belong, nobody's over my head except my mentor. So I can say whatever I want, I have that freedom. Is that society is really like a bad parent because it tells you, oh, we know what is good for you. Why? Because you would not know what is good for you, which is silly. Right? I want to teach my child, and I did taught my daughter since she was little, not what I want her to do, what is right, but I want to teach her how to have critical mind, how to be open. I also want to speak with her candidly and spontaneously and tell her what I'm experiencing and what I'm learning and be ready to learn from her.
So let's say that we have someone that has an intention and has like a good reason to use psychedelics with like someone like, holding space for them. What does one need to prepare before taking that experience?
I don't like giving any suggestion. It's not my job to do so. Internet now, you can click the holy Google and everything will be there. So you just go and do research. I would say do smart research. Maybe I will point them in a direction where I know that people have integrity in terms of how to do and prepare. I would tell them how I'm taking the sacrament. It's a sacrament. It's a pilgrimage. First of all, it's a pilgrimage. You don't just go and put it in. You actually prepare to it. You cleanse for it. You fast for it. You contemplate on it. You meditate with it. You study it. I put it close to my bed and I talk to it. I let it talk to me. So reflect on it. So that's all are very important points rather than jumping into it. Because you're going to be entering a very intimate space with yourself, which probably will also traumatize you. So you want to be, if you had trauma, it will come in the surface anyway. But you want to be meeting it with that sense of humility. Like when you are a pilgrim, you come with humility. When you're coming and you're just taking drug, you're just raping it. And I'm using this word very consciously. You're just taking it on. And the medicine is not used in centuries as a sacrament to do so.
So you mentioned like lots of things can go wrong and like trauma can rise in the experience. I want to talk about like how to prepare a session. So what is set and setting? Can you describe that and the importance of set and setting?
Well, for me, because I'm not telling anybody what they do, what should they do. I'm not one of those people that you tell you, oh, this is the music you're going to listen. This is how your shrine should look like. And I'm going to be with feathers and do. That's not my job. I am not that kind of a holder of the space. And neither would I trust those who would come with that with me unless they're an elders and indigenous elders that I trust. Set and setting, in my case, would be counseling sessions until we develop the sense of safety and trust. And safety and trust is what safe and setting is about. You need to be in the space where you can feel safe. That's a bottom line. It's a first chakra. You need to be safe and you need to trust. And you need to know that you're going to transport yourself into no time and space. Like some of the medicines that are used they can take you within the 15 seconds into a big bang of the universe. So where you want to be in the big bang of the universe when you're falling apart, you want to create a sense of sacredness. And what sacredness is, as I said, I believe people is an autonomous human being, so they would know what that is. I'm not going to give any suggestion, even if they ask.
And I think it means different things to different people. So I think that's very wise.
Absolutely. Somebody can hold chocolate in the shrine. I don't care. Like, you just do what is sacred for you.
You also mentioned intentions that someone cannot come to a session and prepare just for the curiosity of it. How does one set intentions? So when someone is like going to an experience, how do you prepare that?
Intention. I guess my only intention that who said that, like our mind is too little to create even intention. Is like our mind is a kindergarten mind. When you get into this space, it's like your intention will be told to you. You're not making your intention. But if you want to create intention, as I said, don't do it recreationally. Do it from the sacredness point of view, and create the intention where you can relax. That's the only thing I would say, really. Relaxation, as I said, the highest yoga, the practice of Dzogchen, it's actually a practice of deep relaxation. So you and this is what I'm going to be reminding you all throughout the practice, is that you can relax. Your intention is to relax, and then whatever it's there, you're opening up to the space of what is called the neo-ethic experience, which is actually a direct experience. So you don't have any more, you're just a phone call directly with God or deity or whatever you want. It's like there, you are actually facing it. It is the direct experience. There is no words there. Neither you can talk about that. So in some traditions, even after the ceremony or after the journeys, you don't talk about that for another week until it settles in you. You're speechless. You're going into space that is way beyond words, and it's in ourselves. That's the beauty of it, but we don't know it. My teacher, Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen, says, why don't we hear the universe? Why don't we hear the universe inside of our body? Because we never didn't hear it. You can't talk to fish about the water because it doesn't know anything else. So the universe is there, and these are the openings that happens, is that you actually feel that in yourself, which is no words. The words are only, I think, 120,000 years old and created more problem than good.
It is definitely like what's the term? It's an experience that cannot be described for sure. You also mentioned trauma. How do you deal with trauma when it arises during a psychedelic experience, and how can you avoid traumatizing your clients, because psychedelics can create trauma?
Yeah, not create, but reveal.
Sorry.
Well,
Yeah,
first of
reveal.
all, before I say that, I just want to say something that I forgot. It says in the risk associated. Maybe you asked me. Did you ask me about the risk associated?
No. We
Okay.
can talk about the risks associated with
Okay.
psychedelics. Yes.
Okay, so I think because this is for people who are doing that's for friends, it might be good for me to put a little bit more attention to trauma. Is that okay? There is a really good book. It's an older print, but it's a very good book of Judith Lewis Herman that is called Trauma and Recovery. So if you want to be holding a space, I would suggest read a book about trauma. Read, listen, just know more of what it is, really. So it's this is how it's defined. It's intense fear and helplessness, the sense of complete powerlessness, loss of control, and actual threat of annihilation.
Yeah,
You know how to pronounce that? Those English
Yeah.
words sometimes. Um,
It's,
anyways, before 1980s, trauma is considered to be a brain disease. Isn't that fact?
incredible.
Like, and what she was pointing to, Judith Lewis Kerman, is that and she's actually one of the people who work on diagnostic, she's a Harvard psychiatrist who was working on a diagnostic statistic manual for mental illness. So she was forming this book that keeps growing with the time. More and more. And now we have all these weird diseases such as whatever, neurotypical, neurodivergence. What is typical? Like, I think we're missing a big point with that. But she was the one who says that doesn't matter what you are. Are you autistic? Are you psychotic? Are you neurotic? All of those listed in a diagnostic statistic manual, one common denominator of all of those is trauma. Of all of those is trauma, and we're not paying attention to it. And this is what I'm saying, psychiatry failed us. And those of us who were taking antidepressants and antipsychotic know that, feel that on their, but maybe for some people it's good, and I don't want to diminish their experiences. But for most of us, it's failing us. And Robert Whittaker is the journalist who is excessively talking about that. So if you want to know about how much has failed us and what it's doing to us, you can read any of his book, like Mad in America and so on. So it is an interruption. It's like when your life goes like that, and then when trauma happens, it's like interruption. You are one of the first interruption, even for non-traumatized people, is rushing. It's wanting you to be ahead. It's this capitalist idea that we need to be efficient. You need to go to daycare, so you need to learn how to pee and hold your, poop. Like, how can you, by the time that you are 2 years old, you should know how to do that. This is shaming. My teacher says this is like telling somebody, can you move your ears? And you have no idea how to do that. So that's little trauma. Just rushing is the trauma. And as far as I'm concerned, we're all affected to some extent to it. We're speeding as a society, especially a Western society. As I said, I was horrified coming here as an immigrant, even after the war-torn country. So what is the trauma? How can people be traumatized? Not just on those, but the bigger ways. War is the big one, and that's how it started. That's where Artie Lang was actually a war psychiatrist. So war veterans, combat neurosis, huge. Resma Manikim in his book, The Hands of My Grandmother, talks about that. Like, he was sent into Afghanistan. And after 3 years, after a year of being there, he went again because he felt alive there. You kind of have to go. Your sympathetic nervous system is not shutting down. I was working in a war-torn country as a counselor, and I had a person who was coming for help, and he was a sniper person. He was shooting people. He came to ask help from me, but his help was not because he was feeling guilty. His help was because he could not live in a society. He felt alive. So imagine how fucked up that is. So that's the war veterans. I cannot even imagine Palestinian kids. We're talking about the multi-generational war. Colonizing, another way. Raping culture. Today, our culture is a raping culture. Separating our children, not allowing spiritual practices. So just look what British have done to Indian or Chinese or any kind of colonizers. I mean, luckily, I'm not coming from colonizer country. I'm actually Slavic. And I was told by an English person here, a lawyer, to say, Lidija, what the word, how the word slave is coming from the word Slav in English. Just so you know, we named the slave for you because Slavs were slaves to Greeks and Turks and this and that. So I am happy that I'm not a colonizer, that my genetics was such that I'm not one. But you can imagine what kind of intergenerational trauma is happening there. Then another huge one. So what I'm saying is that trauma cannot be taken out of the context. We can't just say, oh, individual trauma. It has to be seen in a cultural, societal, in all different umbrellas. So Resmaa Menakem, that I was telling about his book, he's talking about racism. I mean, imagine a transatlantic slave. And I'm glad that people are finally talking about that. Just a black body trauma, he speaks about this. Also, white body supremacy, it's like the body, police body trauma. So we're talking about the intergenerational things that as I'm saying I'm saying white people cannot even pretend that they know. The only thing that we can do is listen. Also trauma, this is a big one, is people living in cults. Where there is a psychological domination. I mean, dependence on the perpetrator, if you are in a cult, is such that you are more frightened to be alone because you're brainwashed that you need to cling to the perpetrator. And then we're talking about the pedophile rings and so on, that we're just starting to talk about openly, that we can't even open the rings. It's just the women that are coming out of it that are saved by the grace of God. So I cannot even comprehend that trauma. And then imprisonment, incarceration, captivity. I cannot even imagine what Julian Assange is going through. Like, what is that human being can do to human being, and how much trauma is there? And then we're talking about the trauma of medical and psychiatric treatments. A lot of people formed a group about trauma that was actually done by them using these medications, not telling them what is in the small prints. And in the small prints, it says you're going to be suicidal. In the small print says when you're trying to take that off, you're going to go to hell. You're not going to be yourself. Robert Whittaker talks about this condition called, I think it's called akathisia. Akathisia is when you stop taking medications and you just don't know what to do with yourself, and you're just pacing through the room, and you become almost like a paranoid. So he was exploring, and this is very fucked up again, and I'm aware I'm using that word a lot tonight. As I said, I don't care. He was actually observing the massive killing in US. Most of the massive killing in US that is done by whatever, some of them are done by children who have access to the guns, but those that are done is with usually white male, and they were discovering that they were taking the lots of them, if not all of them. I'm not sure, but you can research on that. So that's another one. Sexualized violence, especially against women, trans, queer, people of color, indigenous people, two-spirited. It's like beyond what we can comprehend. And we don't know it because nobody wants to talk to us about that. And why cannot talk to us about that? Because they don't trust that they would be listened. So I'm volunteering for WAVA, which is the organization that works with the survivors of the sexual assault, and I am just completely trained with these levels of trauma that I didn't want to look at because they're uncomfortable. You see, we don't want to think about the uncomfortable. And then last one, but not least, is family and what the patriarchy brought us. Domestic trauma, sexual abuse, incest. In my family, there is incest. My grandfather sexually abused my sister. Stepfather sexually abused both of us. Sibling abuse too. Sibling abuse massive in the families that are dysfunctional. You have older siblings abusing, parental, family abuse, and so on. So this is the capacity that we have as a human being. And who said that we're just monkey running around? So when the trauma happens, and comes to the point right now how to deal with that. When the trauma happens, first to the child. First of all, I have to say that the closer to the beginning the trauma happens, the worse it stays longer. Because if it happens when there is no words to explain it, then it becomes normality. Then you live with it like a fish in the water, and you don't realize until you get out of there. So when we're talking about the environment of trauma, is that when can that begin? Well, from a moment of conception onwards, as far as I'm concerned. Like, my parents made love by loving each other, or was my mother raped? I even go to the point, did they come together? Or is it my father coming first and doesn't give a shit about mom? Like, every single thing matters. The first 3 months when she realized that she's pregnant, did she say, oh, fuck? Or did she say, wow? Every moment. Now they're thinking about children up until recently, and Michelle Odont, who is a very famous obstetrician, was telling us of what they did, the torture they did on the babies as they were born, just torture given to the babies, because we thought that they cannot feel. Children feel in the belly, they can hear sounds. So they can know if there was yelling in the family. They can definitely feel the hit if mother was thrown down through the stairs by the aggressive father. They can feel the alcohol in your body as a mother. And so the earlier it happens, the trauma stays severely damaged. We say that in an environment that is bad, children don't say, oh, my environment is bad, I'm going to check out and find a better family. For them, this is the world. And that's what they learn that the world is about. And if the world is like that, why would the world be like that unless I am bad? So for the child doesn't say you are bad because you're hitting me and you're abusive with me, but it says I am bad. So this I am badness stays a lot. And what I'm noticing in the North American culture, especially with what religion has done is, and this Judeo-Christian spirituality has done, is like, you need to be good. What is good? What is the idea of good? You learn how to pretend. And by the age of 4, you learn how to pretend very well. And you go on and live like that, pretending and thinking that this is the life that is meant to be for everybody. And then you happen to choose the people that are treating you badly, just like your family is treating you badly, because compulsively, that's what you think that you were meant to have. So what about the trauma? How the trauma comes up in, like your question was, how can one, I mean, first of all, research on trauma. I would say as a friend, I don't know even if I would be going into holding space for friends if I have, first of all, not gone through my own metanoia, which is going through your hell and back, so that you are not afraid, you're there. And knowing when the trauma can come in the space like you realizing that something is happening or that something is terribly wrong. Because when you take psychedelics, You lose control. That's what you were signing up for, right? It's actually to break your will, and that's what's healing about it, is that it breaks your will, breaks your ego. So when you're going into that space that you don't have control, if you not having control was not voluntarily when you were little, if the control was induced on you, then you're going to be panicking big time. You know, kids lose control. My daughter, she used to draw for hours and she would be in another world. That's the autonomous, conscious, kids induced loss of control. But if you lose control because of the parent telling you what to do, or jerks you to do something, or whatever it is that creates the trauma, when you come into this state, when you're losing control, you're going to be petrified. I mean, this is happening now with a pandemic. I was asking my teacher, Andrew Feldmar, how does he sees that people who are traumatized, like what he sees in his practice. And he says those who have parents that are caring and who held space and who didn't have this oppressive environment, they're doing fine. They're trusting that this is going to go. I mean, they're a little bit bored and pissed off and want their life back, but whatever, tough luck. Second one is for the people who are always being told what to do, tell you when you need to come home, when you need to get out, this is what we're doing right now. They're petrified, they're terrified about what's happening. So imagine when you're coming into that experience. So when people say bad trip for me is the biggest part of the bad trip is like you're taking something that's going to take you into the jet plane into Australia within whatever time frame. And in the middle of it, in the jet plane, you say to me, I want to get out. So that's the bad trip. And usually what I would say, wait until we land to even think about this or to talk about this. Wait until you land. This is okay. Just relax into it. And this will, once they relax into it, then magic happens. Because as I said, the primeval intelligence is not something that you need to nurture, is where the gap happens. And that's where the good experiences come, and sense of oneness and the emerging mind and all those things that we think we know about, but we have no idea, and better that we don't have idea, because we will abuse that one too. And then somebody says, okay, so your question, I think, was, what about if somebody loses their mind? Mm-hmm. Right? So these psychedelic drugs are actually psychomimic. So they're mimic psychosis. You can actually feel like you're hearing voices, you can feel split, you can feel catatonic, you can feel whatever, schizophrenic or whatnot. And again, if you're just having somebody who will have music, or you are a friend, you will know what the hell to do. I mean, this is like a dangerous ground for somebody. The worst thing that you can do is what my friends that I know did, which is called police, and then they were petrified and investigated and interrogated while being high, or put in a mental hospital when you know what's going to happen to you. Nobody's going to ask you. They're going to just inject something in you. That's where the bioethics should be, and it's actually coming up now more and more. So what is happening in the space where in my lineage, and especially with Artie Lang and Andrew Feldmar are masters of this. They are so tuned in because safety and trust is there. It's developed, right? I'm not doing this unless there is a safety, security, and trust. And when that happens, when you're going on the journey, you know you can trust me. So you would say, I feel afraid. And I can say, would it be easy if I hold your hand? And they can say yes, or they can say no. Then you're dialoguing and being in that space. So Artie Lang would say, sometimes I can go there with them into this wild woods and find their hand that they're reaching. It's always them reaching for the hand. And then we can find our way out. Isn't that amazing? That's
Beautiful.
shaman experience. Another thing that my amazing mentor and teacher, Andrew Feldmer, says that he was with a woman who was in a Riverview hospital. She was, when they closed the hospital and let people be out on the road, he was with her, and she didn't talk. She didn't talk for 3 months. She didn't talk. If she went to a psychiatrist, regular psychiatrist, she would be medicalized or whatnot, like tranquilized, or like, what do you mean not talking? Like disabled. What he did is he had regular sessions with her every week for, I think he says 3 months, and he didn't say a word. He said, who am I to say something? Who am I to investigate? And somebody would say, well, it's unethical to let people suffer if they're in that space of suffering, just to sit there and look at them. And he says, no, it's unethical if I would induce and tell her anything being right or wrong, or what she needs to do or not. Instead, he sat with her, talked to her in all other ways that you're talking without needing to use the language. And then the first thing I think she says is, how can I trust you? Or why would I trust you? Something like that. She just, like, out of the blue said that. And from then on, that was a history. She decided to take psychedelics and so on later on. And first trip apparently was a total nothing happened. Second trip was a total nightmare. She wanted to do it. And the third time, it was complete metanoia. So you're going through by going out from it. So I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, it does. So once you have gone through the peak of the experience, and your clients are like in the calm down part of the experience, how do you close a psychedelic session with a client?
Okay, I'll tell you what I do and what I find it's useful for me. I have something called what I call a hub, which is the pre-session. Once all of this safety, security, trust, I know I'm doing harm reduction, you know you're going to take it, and all that happens, we do pre-session, and then we do long session. And long session depends on what you're taking. I need to know what you're taking, right? That's all I'd like to know, because I'd like to know what it's there. So if somebody takes LSD, I would be sitting for them more like 8 hours. If somebody takes the psilocybin, I would be sitting for them max 6 hours. My teacher sits less, but I sit more, because I'm still feeling myself as a learner. I'm learning. So, and then after that, after that, I have a follow-up session the next day to talk about what the hell happened. And then we have a follow-up session the next week, so that we can actually speak about real integration. I do not want to work with anybody unless we have that. And they need to actually prepay for all of it, because I don't want to be like letting you out. Plus, I want to check in with you after a week. And then it will be up to you. Usually people come back and they want to integrate that experience. But that might be answer to another question. But when you said, like, how long are you staying? So this is the deal. So you have to have a friend or a sitter. And if you don't have a sitter or a friend who can come, who know what you did, if you don't have it, I have it. We have people that are training in counseling, and they know what to do. The counseling process, the holding of a big space is gone. The peak is gone. You're coming down. The only thing that the sitter needs to do is to just make sure, again, that you're relaxed and that you're safe. So you may go for a walk, or you could say, I'll go for a walk. I'd like to go to usually nature is amazing, going to the nature, grounding the body, being in the body. Also, I have all kinds of tricks as a body practitioner of how to tricks, meaning knowledge, of how to bring them into the body experiences. So, for example, the last psychedelic experiences that I held, this beautiful person had a very much body experience the whole time, and I was just there. We were talking, really quiet, no words almost at all, and maybe somewhere after the second half of it, she started vomiting. So great, we vomited, she vomited, we being there with her. And then at some point, because it was coming close to this 6 hours, I didn't want the sitter to be dealing with trauma of seeing somebody vomiting, because she would be coming into that space, right? So then I did my own knowledge with the body work. So she lie down. I did something called the craniosacral. I offered if she wanted it. Of course she did, because she wanted to be. So she was burping a lot. As you know, you can burp and yawn, which is amazing. You're getting rid of stuff. So I held her feet, and she says, this feels amazing. So anything that happens, it needs to be absolutely consensual, moment to moment. By the way, you can't write the consensual part before psychedelic session. Whoever does that, it's full, because you cannot consent, because you don't know what's going to happen. And if somebody who holds the space pretend that they know what's going to happen, that's dangerous. And I wouldn't go with that person. So when she lie down, I was working with her feet. I was also stimulating her endpoints, so face, hands, feet, so that she can have a sense of discharging the energy out rather than impressing in the body. And then I held her head for a while, and then she was actually fine by the time that her sitter came, which was great. And then even this, like, she threw up in a bucket. And I'm just thinking, like, who am I to throw this bucket of this vomit into the bathroom? Like I said, for me, this is also a sacrament. This is also something that has come out of you. Maybe it held you, kept you alive, being in your body for that long. And it's here. So why don't you offer it as in a some kind of meaningful and ceremonial way? And she did it. She went out, she went into the garden, she offered it. So nothing is there to be discarded. Everything is sacred.
Yeah, you mentioned integration. Can you comment on how long the integration process takes after a psychedelic experience?
As long as it takes. For some people, it takes. As I say, some people would come back. Usually they do come back because they would like to just, especially if the trauma occurs, then there is a sense of how would I live right now in my life with that, you know? How would I live? There's a lot of grief. Like, there's the stages of trauma. Is like, first you have to have that safety, security, and trust. But when that happened, the memory comes and the grief comes. So usually with that sense of grief is where you mourn what happened to you, rather than being in that space of demanding what needs to be done. Like, true psychedelic experience is going to break your bones, and it's going to dissolve your ego, and it's going to bring you down on your knees, and you're going to mourn, because somebody says, even now, if you're not sad, you're not paying attention. So you mourn, you grieve, and we don't know what to do with that in a Western society. Martin Prechtel, who is a shaman in Guatemalan Tutu Hill village, he speaks about the grief that needs to be there as long as it takes. Like, in their villages, they would like put alcohol into you so that you grieve more. If they see somebody that is like drunk on the street, they would create a grieving circle around them. Because healing is never happening in one person. It's not possible. Just like a spirituality, it's not happening to one person. If it does, well, if somebody says, oh, I've seen whatever, Jesus or aliens, I would say, so what? It happens in communion, in the sacred communion with either two or more people. So when this integration happens, it happens with integration with me, in communion with my, I'm talking about my space, but it would be in the space of the healing circle. And then you can involve the healing of those friends that are around you. So you are just expanding this space of healing out. Pema Chodron, who is one of the Buddhist nuns, she would put it this way, and this is a beautiful poem, actually, I think inspired by her teacher, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, who says, under the hard means hard, right? Anger, hard, and there is fear. So you have a tectonic like you have tectonic parts of the earth, you have a tectonic parts of your integration. So under the hard, you kind of angry, fuck, that happens to me or whatnot. Under that, there is fear. Under the fear, there is grief. And then within the grief, it's sadness. And within that sadness is softness. And in the softness is the vast open space. I'll say it again. Under the hard, there is fear. Under the fear, there is pain. Under the pain, there is sadness. And inside of the sadness is the vast open space.
Beautiful. I have one last question, and then we can jump into the Q&A. Do you have any plans for the future, and how do you see yourself contributing to the psychedelic renaissance?
Thank you for asking that. I mean, I'm not doing this by advertising. I actually, when they just interviewed me for CBC, I have to say I didn't like that, because people that called me that wanted to have that experience, I just had to say no, 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 no. So I would just rather, as alchemists do, dare, and be quiet. I don't like to advertise. I don't like to be, even after this, I'm seriously like, okay, who's going to call me now? Just don't call me if you want to do it recreationally. Don't call me unless you are ready to stay with me for a long time until we have safety, security, and trust. And then I can hold space for your experience. Or you can go to a local person that can do that, and you will be missing this lineage of healing that I am part of. Well, I'm also not an accomplice of MAPS. I think MAPS is political. They wanted to legalize it. I'm not for legalization, not with this kindergarten government and they're being in bed with capitalism and profit and psychiatry that is in bed with pharmaceutical industry. Like I don't trust them. So I would not go into legalization. I mean, look what's happening with cannabis. I would go for decrim. Same with sex work. No legalizing, just decrim, just leave the fuck these people alone and give them space to breathe. And if they can use this, give them opportunity to use that. And let's demystify this Nixon era and just name it. It's not a dangerous drug. It's dangerous because it's shaking the status quo. So I am for decrim, I'm not for legalizing. So that's where I'm not accomplice to you. And if I'm contemplating on putting training, just because I really think it's necessary. It's necessary, and my training will be on integration. And first thing that I would do in this training that I'm contemplating, I'm actually having dates in October. It would be asking an Indigenous elder to be there for the sake of it, just to cover what is that really? What is the sacrament used for thousands of years? And then I would have my teacher who gladly accepted my invitation, Andrew Feldmar, who said that he would be happily talking about bioethics. So that would be a big one, bioethics. Then I will be talking about the body, holding space. This, what I've talked right now, I will be talking about holding space in a very specific way. One of the training that I really appreciate that I finished is called the biodynamic craniosacral therapy, which is basically paying attention to the space around. So when I'm sitting with a person, I'm not just looking that they're ending where their skin is. They're ending way further away from their skin. So I can actually, my attentiveness, my attunement will be there much further where they are. And that's where I will be holding that space. And I think it's very important to learn that and to be quiet and to be present. So that's my plan for the future.
That sounds great. I can't wait to hear more about that. How do you feel about jumping into the Q&A?
Yeah, right on. Go ahead.
Okay. So we have here the top question. It says, I've seen a number of retreats offering group therapy treatment. Wondering your thoughts on effect of group versus individual therapy. Do you have any
That's a
thoughts
good
on that?
question. Super good question. And also it's the question that I think you said you're going to ask me, but you didn't, which is you forgot probably in all of it, which is the group psychedelic, the psychedelic tourism, the Aya tourism, right?
Yeah.
And this is kind of like a bus queue. You're just going into, I mean, if it's a community, if it's done on an indigenous way, in an indigenous land, and uh, I'm just blocking right now, but it's in the South America, Amazon. Um, how it's going is the community is healing, and so there is a group, but it's a group of community of people who know each other, who care for each other. Also, another thing is that the shaman is taking the sacrament. You see, how can somebody be there and stare into you with something with their rational mind without tuning themselves into that experience, not needing to, like R.D. Lang would take not a big dose of LSD. If you take 1,200 micrograms, he would take 300 micrograms, but he will be there with you on that experience. And of course, that's the time when the psychedelics were legal. So in those sacraments in the Amazon, is that the shaman would take the sacrament, but you don't have to take it. It's it's the shaman who's taking the sacrament. That's the thing. And then you're doing the group healing. But if you're doing with the Aya tourism, well, first of all, there are all these like new grown shamans that are coming up like mushrooms right now, and I'm not blaming them because they're living in a horrible situation. So of course, if the white gringos will come and like be curious about that, I'm going to offer a daycare for Aya. But the thing is that you are in a bus queue. You're going. Imagine yourself sitting for a bus stop. You don't know the driver, and you don't know the people who are inside with you, and you don't know where you're going. So 3 things. You don't know the driver, you're not in charge. You don't know the people around you, and you don't know where you're going. So that's a recipe for disaster as far as I know. So that's what it comes into a group, unless it's done in a proper setting. But group therapy, as a therapy, it has to be beyond. Beyond is a psychotherapist who was really famous for working with groups. Andrew Feldmar was leading groups. R.D. Lang was leading groups. They were doing all kinds of things like a rebirthing, going through the canal, like of birth, and like lots of things has been done. Like R.D. Lang had this a group homes in London, one of them being Kingsley Hall, where he would invite people who are, doesn't matter what you are, if you're psychotic, if you're whatever you are, if you want to take medication, if you don't take a medication, the only thing that you're going to be in this house is treated well. And you can come down and do yoga, meditation, rebirthing, shaking. You would be cooking in a communal space. There was one guy who was didn't want to eat. He was in a room. He was defecating in a room. He was peeing in a room. They did not want to come in and disturb him. The only thing they would do is leave a plate of food in front of his door. And when he is ready, he came out. And one day, after I don't know how many years, he came out and he came down and he picked up the guitar. And when they asked him, so why did you wait for this long to come down? And he says it was necessary waste of time. Necessary waste of time. So that's the group that I would like to be. I was dreaming about that. Like, oh my God, my sister told me about R.D. Lang. I wish that she can go and do that. But instead, they just drugged her with the pharmaceuticals. There are other group places that I know. There is like a group called Haven in Gabriola. There is, I don't know. And these are just very shady. I know that there was a sexual misconduct going on there. Shady places. So if you want to go into anything like that, like do your homework and know what you're looking for before you get yourself into any of that.
Yeah, it's definitely a difficult situation. So another question here says, what counseling orientations are most compatible with psychedelic experiences? And what is the orientation that you're practicing?
Orientation? Maybe
I guess you can say.
counseling or something. As I said, maybe that person wasn't there from the beginning. They said you're born a healer or you're apprentice with one. So all the things that I've done, like I've trained as a counselor back in my country, and when I came here with my own bags of trauma, I was not even thinking, as a single mother, I was not even thinking about going and taking the UBC training to become a counseling psychologist. What I've learned there was solid enough. I did Gestalt therapy, biodynamic therapy. So I didn't want to get a paper and to be accredited. As I said, I don't need anybody over my head. I wanted to apprentice. And that's what I choose. And seriously, even with the apprenticing, I have to say that most of what I've learned in my school was that I know what I'm doing. And what most of that I do right now, it's unlearning that, because I don't know. I don't know anything. We don't know. And that's what Jacques Lacan has said. The Freud said the healing ends, or the health is, you don't go to therapy anymore when you know just as much as the analyst. But Jacques Lacan, who was a French psychoanalyst, says Freud didn't have a courage to say, neither analysts know. We have no clue. We're resting into unknown. And this space of being together, this communion, this sense of non-doing, present being, when we both rest into something that is larger than ourselves. I'm not giving myself into you. You are not giving yourself into me. It's not a sadistic dominator position. It's the position of equals, of open-hearted presence. This is where spirit comes through. When the two of us are there, spirit comes through. So yeah, lineage of no lineage.
That comes perfect with the next question. So Dominique was asking, can you recommend how one would go about finding a mentor?
That's a good question. I'm a good mentor. I have two people that are mentoring with me. Actually, I have to say my demographic is pretty all over the place. So I have a very young people, but I also have more elders, like 65, 75 years old. So those baby boomers that don't want to end up in, with a TV screen and a bunch of medications and dying in a home. So these women want to know how to hold a space, but you would have to have a practice. You have to practice because, as I'm saying, I don't know if my teacher, Andrew Feldmer, accepts more, but I am in supervision with him. So we have a lineage. So it's if you are interested, if you have your practice, if you have clients, then I am welcoming people to mentor with me.
And if they don't live in Vancouver, are there any tips that you can give people to find a mentor? I guess it's like a very difficult thing to do.
It's like asking me, hey, how can I find somebody who plays a guitar, go look for virtuoso.
Of course.
Research, do your diligence. Caveat emptor. Caveat emptor is old saying. Caveat emptor. Know what you're looking for. It's buyers beware.
Okay, so the next question says, I have had to suspend my exploration of psychedelics because whenever I take LSD, psilocybin, or MDMA, I get agonizing gut pain that lasts 12 hours. It's strong enough to obliterate the side effects. Very sad, since I was using it with the hope of ridding myself of depression. Any help possible? Any causes or cures?
Do you mind if I repeat parts that I didn't understand well? So did you say that
of course.
Pain? It was a headache or pain?
Okay. Gut pain. He gets gut pain every time he uses psilocybin, LSD, or MDMA.
Mm-hmm. Okay, gut pain. So I would say, again, go do your diligence and research. I can just tell you from my experience of what it is. Yep. First of all, what's the set and setting and who's holding space for you? That's number one that I would say. because maybe you are not relaxing because your body, you can't lie with the body. The body is like a child, and it's last to change. So if the body doesn't trust the environment that is holding the space for you, it's not going to let go. I had a client that was hiccuping and what did she has? Nausea and hiccups a whole 6 hours. Nausea and hiccups a whole 6 hours. But we work most of it. But we were there with it, and it was amazing. I'm going to mix up the stories for that person, because story is, I'm not here to tell anybody's stories, but this was something that might be helpful. Is then they have gone through the powerful experience coming out of that, almost like a rebirthing experiences. There is also people who do it once and they have that kind of experience, but after a while they would want to do it again, and again it's deeper experience. So first, usually the psilocybin will create this kind of a gut kind of things, because you have the mycelium going everywhere and just taking all this stuffs and toxins out. So the first experience might not be a good experience. You could actually have headaches. You can have. So the question would be, and also another question that you didn't ask, and I'm glad that I'm answering right now, is I would never do the psychedelic with anybody who's on the psychopharmacological drugs. So if you have any psychopharmacology in your system, we don't know what that is. If you did take it in the past, it's still lingering in the fat tissue, it's still lingering in the linings of the guts. So all of that could be taken into consideration. The MDMA is known to create, there is this down effect after. So people do have recorded they do have headaches and sometimes feel like a nauseous and so on. But if there is an appropriate setting, and if there is follow up with the vitamins and the proper things on time, then that is okay. I had a friend who, I didn't do a session with him, but this is an anecdotal experience. A friend of mine's husband who had always strong gut issues, and he was taking the psilocybin for like years and years, and nothing happened. Like one time, for some reason, one time when he took it, maybe it was a large dose, he thought he was dying of pain in the guts. His headache, he was dying. He was cold. They put like blankets and blankets and blankets on them. Nothing helped. They were on the verge of holding the, because his wife was his sitter. They were in verge, experienced, like really experienced, both of them, and they were wanting to call medical, and they decided not to call, and they just stayed through it, and he came out of it, and he doesn't have any gut pain ever since.
Wow.
Proved ever since. But that's, I'm saying, it's anecdotal experience. So I would be curious to know why and how, but I hope that gives the answer.
I think you gave a lot of information there. I think we have time for one more question. So someone asks, do you have to be a spiritual person to have a productive trip or to be a good space holder?
Wow, wonderful question. Thank you to whoever said that. Yes and no, depending on what for you means the spirituality. So if I'm saying, if you have a tradition like Martin Prechtel, tradition of spirituality, where you have elders, where you have place to bow, people to kneel to, and you know that it's an ongoing unbroken lineage, like lineage that I chose to be. It's the unbroken lineage that is 2,600 years old. I didn't want to be spiritual because Joe told me that he found the meaning of life, or the church told me of how to interpret spirituality, or any form. But in a larger sense, well, first of all, if you take the psychedelics that are the sacraments, and they're noetic in experience, they're mind manifesting. If you have taken a lot of psychedelic, you cannot not be spiritual. It's like, and then actually what you realize is, I am not the drop in the ocean. I'm the ocean in the drop. I am not in the world. The world is within me. You have the experience where you, and my teacher would say, and what does that mean? Is somebody who knows what that means? Nobody knows. Nobody can claim that they know. Everybody could claim that they're enlightened. Everybody could claim who know that there is spirituality. Is just a really enlightened person will never tell you that they're enlightened. Real spiritual person will know that spirituality is not spiritual. Spirituality is here and now, how we treat each other. What is the space of that we're being with one another? And lastly, yoga practices, which is the practices of wholeness. If you practice yoga, if you go deep into your body, if you do deep breathing practices, you don't have to do psychedelics. You actually will slowly climb on Mount Everest of the psychedelic spiritual experiences. We know that. So you don't have to. Actually, what psychedelics are doing, how they're bringing you into spiritual experiences, is that we are born as spiritual beings. They say up until the age of 4, our brain is called the chandelier brain. So it's actually same brain that is produced during the psychedelic experience is the same as children's brain. Isn't that amazing? So if you want to do a psychedelics, go spend time with 4 years old. I love spending time weekly with the 4 and 6 years old because they take me. I don't tell them what to do. They tell me what to do. And I have a profound spiritual experience. I lose myself in that. And so you would say, what is the spiritual, can you define the spirituality? No, you cannot define spirituality. But what do you feel yourself to be? You realize that you are a physical being, that you're an emotional being, you're a mental being, you're a cultural being, you are the universal being too. So you are the spiritual being. So that is your birthright. It's your essence.
That is so true. I think that's the last question we have time for. Thank you so much, Lidija, for your time and for your information. Is there a way for people to learn more and to know more about your work and about you?
You can just Google me. You can find me everywhere. The Yoga Wheel is my company, and I would really request don't email me to hold the psychedelic experience with you, because that's not my primary work. You can work with me to alleviate your suffering, and that could be a process. But yeah, don't call me to do this on Monday, okay?
Yeah, we'll make sure that we won't share your information with anybody. Thank you so much, and thank you.
Thank you, Maps. Thank you, everybody who was there that I cannot see you, and thank you for ancestors of this land who was holding this for us.
Yeah, I would also like to thank everybody who attended this event and who is here with us today. You made this possible. I would also like to thank again our sponsors, Trip and Sports Lab. And MAPS is a charitable organization, so we encourage you to make donations. There's a button down there. If you're in a position to give, your support goes a long way in helping us work towards the legalization of psychedelics. I know that Lidija might not agree with that.
I'm going to donate for sure.
Thank you. So yeah, to learn more about MAPS Canada, you can visit our website is mapscanada.org, and thank you again, and I'll see you in our next session.
Thank you, Antonio.
Bye.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Lidia. De nada. Gracias a ti.